Ambassador Teatrix of the Veloran Collective had seen many strange things in her 300 years of diplomatic service. She had witnessed the crystalline wars of the Shattered Nebula. She had negotiated peace between species that breathed methane and species that breathed pure nitrogen. She had even once convinced a sentient asteroid to change its orbit. But nothing in all her long years had prepared her for what she was about to witness in Conference Room 7 of the Galactic Federation headquarters. The humans had brought their pet. "What is that creature doing here?" she asked, her 4 eyes blinking in confusion at the small furry animal that sat beside the human ambassador. Ambassador Sarah Chen smiled and reached down to scratch behind the creature's ears. "This is Max. He's my emotional support dog. He goes everywhere with me." The dog, a golden-furred beast with a long tongue that hung from its mouth, looked up at Teatrix with what she could only describe as pure happiness. Its tail moved back and forth against the floor with a rhythmic thumping sound. "It appears to be malfunctioning," said Director Zyxon of the Crystalline Accord, his body chiming with concern as light passed through his geometric form. "Its rear appendage is moving without purpose." "He's wagging his tail," Sarah explained. "It means he's happy to meet you all." Teatrix exchanged glances with the other non-human delegates. The Galactic Federation Council meeting had been called to discuss trade routes and border disputes, not to observe human bonding rituals with prey animals. And yet, as the meeting progressed, Teatrix found herself unable to look away from the strange relationship between human and beast. Sarah would reach down periodically to touch the creature. The dog would lean into her hand. Sometimes the animal would rest its head on Sarah's foot, and the human's entire body would seem to relax. When tensions rose during the debate about mining rights in the outer arm, Max placed his head in Sarah's lap, and the human's voice remained calm and measured even as other delegates raised theirs. "I wish to submit a formal complaint," announced High Commander Vrex of the Militant Concordat, his scales bristling with irritation. "The human brings a beast to these sacred halls of diplomacy. This is an insult to the Federation." Sarah looked at Vrex with patient eyes. "With respect, High Commander, Max has helped me remain calm during our discussion. I believe that has actually helped our negotiations today." "Calm," Vrex's neck frill extended in disbelief. "You claim this creature affects your emotional state." "Very much so. Humans have had dogs as companions for over 15,000 years. We've evolved together. When I touch Max, my brain releases chemicals that reduce stress and increase trust. He literally makes me a better negotiator." The room fell silent. 15,000 years of bonding with another species. Teatrix did the math in her head. The Veloran had been spacefaring for 50,000 years, and in all that time they had never considered forming emotional bonds with other creatures. It seemed inefficient, unnecessary. And yet, watching Sarah Chen and her dog, Teatrix wondered if perhaps they had missed something important. After the meeting concluded, Teatrix approached the human ambassador. "May I ask you some questions about your relationship with this animal?" Sarah smiled warmly. "Of course, Ambassador. Max loves meeting new people." The dog turned its attention to Teatrix, and she felt an odd sensation as those brown eyes looked up at her. The creature showed no fear, only curiosity and something that looked almost like affection. "Does it bond with all beings, or only with you?" "Dogs are remarkable that way. They can form bonds with almost anyone who treats them well. Would you like to pet him?" Teatrix hesitated. In Veloran culture, physical contact between species was reserved for combat or mating, but something about the dog's open expression made her want to try. She extended one of her manipulator arms and touched the creature's head. The fur was soft, warm. The dog leaned into her touch, and Teatrix felt a strange flutter in her secondary heart. "He likes you," Sarah said. "How can you tell?" "See how he's leaning toward you, and his eyes are soft. If he was scared, his ears would be back and his body would be tense. But he's relaxed. He trusts you. Trust. The word struck Teatrix like a physical blow. She had spent 300 years building diplomatic relationships based on treaties, trade agreements, and carefully balanced power dynamics. Never once had she considered that trust could be given so freely, so quickly, based on nothing more than a gentle touch. Over the following weeks, Teatrix began to observe the humans more closely. She noticed that pack bonding extended far beyond their relationships with animals. Humans formed intense emotional connections with each other, with objects, with places, even with ideas. A human crew member on the Federation station had named her shuttle and spoke to it as if it could hear. Another human had befriended a crystalline cleaning unit and brought it gifts of mineral samples. A third had somehow convinced a group of 5 different alien species to meet regularly for something called game night. What is the purpose of these gatherings? Teatrix asked the human organizer, a young man named James who worked in the station's engineering department. James looked up from the game board, where colorful tokens represented armies fighting for control of a fictional world. We're having fun together, building friendships. But you are from different species, different cultures. What advantage does this friendship provide? James thought about this for a moment. Well, last week my shield generator broke down, and Krex here knew where to find the parts I needed. He gestured to a massive reptilian being who raised one clawed hand in acknowledgement. And when Krex's clutchmate was sick, I stayed up all night helping him translate medical texts from standard to his home language. We help each other because we're friends. You would not help each other otherwise. Maybe, but it would feel different, like a transaction instead of a gift. James looked at Teatrix with earnest eyes. Don't you have friends, Ambassador? The question caught Teatrix off guard. She had colleagues. She had alliance partners. She had beings who owed her favors and beings to whom she owed debts. But friends? The concept seemed almost childish. I am beginning to wonder if perhaps I do not, she admitted. James smiled. Would you like to join our game night next week? We're always looking for new players. 3 months later, Teatrix submitted a formal proposal to the Galactic Federation Science Council. The proposal was titled Study of Human Pack Bonding Behaviors and Potential Applications for Interspecies Relations. It was the first research project of its kind in Federation history. The Science Council approved the study unanimously. Dr. Kralvex had spent his entire career studying the psychology of sentient beings. He had mapped the neural networks of 17 species and identified the chemical processes behind emotions as diverse as rage, joy, and the peculiar melancholy that crystalline beings experienced during their molting phase. But nothing in his extensive research had prepared him for the humans. You are telling me, he said slowly, his voice synthesized through the translation implant that allowed his gas-formed body to communicate with solid beings, that you feel emotional distress when your coffee machine stops functioning. The human subject, a middle-aged engineer named Robert, nodded vigorously. Betsy and I have been through a lot together. She's gotten me through 12 years of early mornings and late nights. When she broke down last week, I was genuinely sad. Betsy is an inanimate object. It has no consciousness, no ability to reciprocate your emotional investment. I know that, but it doesn't change how I feel, Robert shrugged. Humans bond with things. We can't help it. We give names to our cars, our plants, our stuffed animals. We get attached to old t-shirts and lucky pens and the mug our grandmother gave us when we were kids. Dr. Kralvex made a notation in his research files. This was the 47th interview he had conducted with human subjects, and each one revealed new depths to their pack bonding behavior. He had initially assumed that humans bonded primarily with other humans and occasionally with animals, but their capacity for attachment seemed to have no logical limits. He had met a human who cried when her favorite restaurant closed, even though she had never spoken to the owners. He had interviewed a man who kept a broken watch that hadn't worked in 20 years simply because it had belonged to his father. He had observed a group of humans become genuinely distressed when a fictional character in a story died, despite knowing that the character had never existed. "Does this bonding provide you with any survival advantage?" Kralvix asked. Robert considered the question. "I suppose it makes us care more about our environment. If you love something, you take better care of it, and if you're attached to your tools and equipment, you maintain them properly. Plus, the social bonds we form with other people are incredibly important for our mental health and our communities." But surely there are disadvantages. The emotional pain when a bond is broken, for instance. Oh, absolutely. Losing something or someone you love is one of the most painful experiences a human can go through. Robert's expression grew serious. But I don't think any of us would trade away our ability to bond just to avoid that pain. The connections we form are what make life meaningful. Dr. Kralvix found this statement fascinating. His own species, the vaporous collective, did not form individual emotional bonds. They existed as a diffuse consciousness, experiencing existence collectively rather than individually. The concept of loving a single object or being to the exclusion of others was entirely alien to him. And yet, as he observed the humans on the Federation station, he began to notice something remarkable. The humans seemed happier than other species. They laughed more. They expressed more enthusiasm. They approached problems with optimism and resilience that other beings found inexplicable. When the water recycling system on Deck 7 broke down, the crystalline maintenance crew declared the situation hopeless and recommended abandoning that section of the station. The human engineering team named the broken recycler Old Faithful, spent 3 days taking turns talking to it while they worked on repairs, and eventually restored it to full function. "Why did you not simply replace the unit?" Kralvix asked the human team leader afterward. "Old Faithful has been part of this station for 18 years, she replied, patting the recycler's casing affectionately. "The replacement parts would have taken months to arrive. Besides, we weren't going to give up on her. The recycler, is a machine. She's our machine. We take care of our own." Kralvix added this observation to his growing research file. The human's tendency to anthropomorphize objects, to assign personality and gender to inanimate things, seemed to increase their motivation to preserve and repair rather than discard and replace. It was inefficient from a purely logical perspective, but it produced results that pure efficiency could not. Meanwhile, Ambassador T.A. had begun implementing some of the humans' bonding techniques in her diplomatic work. She started by learning the names of her staff. In 300 years of service, she had never bothered to learn the individual designations of her assistants. They were simply functionaries, replaceable components in her diplomatic apparatus. But the humans seemed to know everyone's name. Sarah Chen could walk through the station and greet dozens of beings by their personal designations, asking about their families and their hobbies and their favorite foods. And those beings responded to her with a warmth and willingness that T.A. had never experienced. So T.A. learned names. She discovered that her senior aide, a young Veloran named Prixtal, had a passion for composing mathematical music. She found out that the cleaning technician who serviced her quarters had recently become a grandparent. She learned that the security guard who stood outside the conference room every day was afraid of the dark, but had never told anyone because he was embarrassed. And something strange began to happen. These beings, whom T.A. had barely acknowledged for decades, started to trust her. They shared information with her that they would never have shared before. They went out of their way to assist her projects. They warned her of potential problems before they became crises. "What have you done to your staff?" High Commander Vrex demanded one day, his scales rippling with suspicion. "They are abnormally loyal to you." "I learned their names," T.A. replied simply. Vrex stared at her as if she had spoken in an unknown language. Their names, what possible difference could that make? But Teatrix was beginning to understand. The humans had shown her something that her species had forgotten, perhaps had never known. Connection mattered. Individual bonds created networks of trust that no treaty or trade agreement could replicate. And those networks were stronger, more resilient, and more valuable than any formal alliance. The research study expanded. Dr. Kralvex recruited scientists from 12 different species to help document and analyze human-pack bonding behavior. They observed humans in their habitats, in their workplaces, in their recreational activities. They interviewed hundreds of subjects and collected thousands of hours of data. The preliminary findings were astonishing. Humans who had strong social bonds lived longer and healthier lives. They recovered faster from illness and injury. They performed better in high-stress situations. They were more creative, more productive, and more willing to take calculated risks for the benefit of their communities. But perhaps most importantly, humans who formed bonds with other species showed dramatically improved cooperation rates. When a human became friends with an alien being, both individuals became more likely to understand and accommodate each other's cultural differences. Misunderstandings decreased. Conflicts resolved more quickly. Trust increased exponentially. We may have discovered something fundamental about interspecies relations, Kralvex reported to the Federation Science Council. Human-pack bonding appears to activate deep psychological mechanisms that transcend cultural and biological differences. If we can understand and replicate these mechanisms, we may be able to transform the nature of diplomatic relations throughout the galaxy. The Council listened with growing interest. For thousands of years, the Galactic Federation had struggled with internal conflicts. Species that had been allies for generations would suddenly turn hostile over minor disputes. Peace treaties would hold for a century and then collapse overnight. The Federation's history was written in cycles of cooperation and conflict that seemed to have no clear pattern. But the humans seemed to break this pattern. In the 50 years since humans had joined the Federation, they had not engaged in a single armed conflict with another member species. They had resolved every dispute through negotiation. They had formed friendships and alliances that crossed every cultural boundary. And now, the research was beginning to reveal why. The Galactic Federation Council chamber was silent as Ambassador Teatrix presented her findings. She stood at the center of the great circular room, surrounded by representatives from every member species, and spoke with a confidence she had not felt in centuries. For 300 years I served the Federation as a diplomat, she began. I negotiated treaties, I brokered trade agreements, I prevented wars, and I believed that I was good at my job, but I was wrong. I was missing something fundamental. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared above the chamber, showing images from the research study. Humans with their dogs, humans with their alien friends, humans nomming their machines and caring for their plants and weeping at stories about people who never existed. When humans first joined the Federation, many of us dismissed their bonding behaviors as primitive, inefficient, childish. We thought their emotional attachments were weaknesses to be exploited. Teatrix paused, her 4 eyes scanning the assembled delegates. We were fools. The hologram changed to show data charts and statistical analyses. Our research demonstrates conclusively that human-pack bonding creates measurable improvements in cooperation, communication, and conflict resolution. Humans who form emotional bonds with members of other species show a 94% reduction in hostile interactions. They demonstrate an 87% improvement in successful negotiation outcomes. And they maintain stable, productive relationships for an average of 43% longer than non-bonding species. High Commander Vrex rose from his seat, his scales flashing with skepticism. You are suggesting that we should learn to be more like humans, that we should form emotional attachments and name our equipment and weep at fictional stories. I am suggesting, Trix replied calmly, that we should learn from humans. They have discovered something that we missed. Connection is not weakness, it is strength. The bonds we form with others, whether those others are humans or aliens or animals or even machines, make us more resilient, more creative, and more capable of working together. She stepped forward, addressing Vrex directly. High Commander, in the past 6 months, I have learned the names of every being who works in my department. I have asked about their lives, their families, their dreams. I have formed bonds with them. And do you know what has happened? Vrex's neck frill twitched. What? My department's efficiency has increased by 37%. Our conflict resolution rate has improved by 62%. And for the first time in my 300-year career, my staff actually enjoys working with me. Trix allowed herself a small smile. The humans would say that we have become friends. The chamber erupted in murmurs of disbelief and debate. For many of the delegates, the concept of friendship between superior and subordinate was as alien as the concept of friendship between predator and prey. Their societies were built on hierarchies and obligations, on careful calculations of power and advantage. But Ambassador Sarah Chen, sitting with her dog Max at her side, simply smiled. Dr. Kralvex rose to address the council. His gaseous form shimmered with carefully modulated energy as he spoke. The research is clear. Human-pack bonding is not merely a cultural quirk or a primitive survival mechanism. It is a highly evolved social technology that produces measurable benefits for individuals and communities, and it is a technology that can be learned. He gestured to his research team, which included beings from a dozen different species. Over the past several months, my colleagues and I have been practicing human bonding techniques. We have learned to use names, to ask personal questions, to express appreciation and gratitude, to form emotional connections that transcend professional obligations. The crystalline researcher, a being named Director Zyxen, chimed in agreement. I was initially skeptical. My species does not naturally form individual bonds. We are geometric, mathematical. We find comfort in patterns and structures, not in personal relationships. But I have discovered that the human way of connecting does not require abandoning my nature. It simply requires acknowledging that other beings have value beyond their functional utility. A Veloran scientist added her perspective. We have documented significant psychological benefits among non-human subjects who practice pack bonding techniques, reduced stress hormones, improved cognitive function, increased creativity and problem-solving ability. The humans have stumbled upon something that works for all sentient beings, regardless of biology or culture. The debate continued for hours. Some delegates argued that adopting human practices would corrupt their own cultural traditions. Others worried that emotional bonds would compromise diplomatic objectivity. Still others questioned whether the research could be replicated on a larger scale. But throughout the discussion, small moments kept occurring that demonstrated the power of the human approach. When Director Zyxen's crystalline structure began to cloud with stress, a human researcher noticed immediately and suggested a brief break. During the break, she brought Zyxen a small mineral sample as a gift, knowing that crystalline beings found comfort in examining new geometric patterns. When High Commander Vrex grew frustrated with a colleague's argument, Ambassador Chen quietly approached him and asked how his clutchmate was recovering from her illness. The simple act of personal inquiry seemed to deflate Vrex's aggression. When the debate threatened to become heated, Max the dog walked around the chamber, allowing delegates to pet him. The simple physical contact seemed to calm beings of every species. By the end of the session, the council had reached a preliminary consensus. The human-pack bonding model would be formally studied as a potential framework for diplomatic relations. Training programs would be developed to teach bonding techniques to diplomats and negotiators throughout the Federation, and a new position would be created, Ambassador of Connection, tasked with promoting interspecies friendship and emotional bonds. Ambassador T.H. Ricks was nominated for the position unanimously. As she accepted the nomination, T.H. Ricks felt something she had not felt in centuries: hope. Not the calculated optimism of a successful negotiation, but genuine hope for the future of the Federation and all its member species. She looked at Sarah Chen and her dog, and she understood at last what the humans had been trying to show them all along. The galaxy was vast and cold and full of beings who were different from each other in countless ways. Treaties and trade agreements could create temporary peace, but they could not create lasting harmony. Only connection could do that. Only the simple, powerful, ancient magic of caring for another being and having them care for you in return. The humans had brought that magic with them from their small blue planet. They had carried it in their bonds with their dogs and their children, their friends and their families, their lucky pens and their beloved coffee machines. And now they were offering to share it with the galaxy. The Galactic Federation would never be the same. 5 years had passed since the Council's historic decision, and Ambassador T.H. Ricks stood on the observation deck of the Federation headquarters, watching ships from 100 worlds come and go. Beside her sat Max the dog, now elderly and gray around the muzzle, but still wagging his tail whenever someone approached. Sarah Chen had retired from diplomatic service the previous year, but she had asked T.H. Ricks to care for Max in her absence. The request had surprised T.H. Ricks at first. Dogs typically bonded most strongly with a single human, and she had assumed Max would want to retire with his original companion. But Sarah had smiled and shaken her head. Max loves you, T.H. Ricks. He chose you years ago, during that first council meeting when you touched his head. Dogs know things about people that people don't always know about themselves. He knew you had the capacity for connection. He's been your friend ever since. And it was true. Over the 5 years of the Pack Bonding Initiative, Max had become T.H. Ricks's constant companion. He attended every diplomatic meeting, every research session, every training workshop. He had become a symbol of the program itself, a living demonstration of how emotional bonds could cross the boundaries of species and culture. The program had been more successful than anyone had dared to hope. Diplomatic incidents throughout the Federation had decreased by 63%. Trade disputes that once would have escalated to threats of military action were now resolved through personal mediation. And a new generation of diplomats was emerging, trained in the arts of connection and empathy alongside traditional negotiation techniques. Even High Commander Vrex had changed. He had initially resisted the program, calling it soft and naive. But after a particularly difficult negotiation with a hostile species had been resolved through personal bonding techniques, he had reluctantly begun to study the human approach. Now he was one of its most passionate advocates, his scales often rippling with what he insisted was not affection but strategic appreciation. Dr. Kralvex's research had expanded into dozens of new areas. His team had discovered that pack bonding techniques improved not just diplomatic outcomes, but also scientific collaboration, educational achievement, and artistic creativity. They had documented cases of interspecies friendships that had led to breakthrough discoveries and unprecedented cultural exchanges. And throughout the Federation, small changes were accumulating into something larger. Ships were being named instead of numbered. Crew members were learning each other's personal histories. Leaders were asking about their subordinates' families and hobbies and dreams. The cold machinery of interstellar civilization was slowly warming with the heat of genuine connection. T.H. Ricks reached down and scratched behind Max's ears, and the old dog leaned into her touch with a contented sigh. She thought about all the years she had spent building alliances based on calculation and advantage, and she marveled at how much more powerful a simple act of kindness could be. A young Veloran diplomat approached her, nervous and uncertain. "Ambassador T.H. Ricks, I'm starting my first assignment tomorrow, and I was wondering if you had any advice." Teatrix smiled, an expression that would have been unthinkable for her a few years ago. "Learn names," she said. "Ask questions about lives, not just about positions. Remember that every being you meet, no matter how different they seem, is capable of connection. And never, ever underestimate the power of showing someone that you care about them." The young diplomat nodded, committing her words to memory. "Oh, and one more thing," Teatrix added. "If you ever have the opportunity to pet a dog, take it. You never know how much it might change your life." Max's tail wagged against the floor, and Teatrix felt something warm and bright in her secondary heart. The humans had given the galaxy many gifts over the years: technology, art, music, stories. But their greatest gift was the simplest one. They had taught the galaxy how to love. And the galaxy was better for it. In the council chamber where it had all begun, a new plaque had been installed beside the entrance. It bore a simple message in the languages of every member species. "Connection is strength, friendship is power, love is the foundation of peace." Beneath the words was an image of a human hand resting on the head of a golden dog, and the two of them gazing out at the stars together. Some of the older delegates still grumbled that it was too sentimental, too soft, too human. But they were fewer now, and their objections were quieter, because even they had begun to feel it, the warmth that came from being known and valued and cared for. Even they had begun to understand that the humans had not shown the galaxy something new, but something ancient and fundamental that had been waiting all along to be rediscovered. The Galactic Federation had studied human-pack bonding as a model for diplomatic relations, and in doing so, they had learned something far more important than diplomacy. They had learned how to be family. Across the galaxy, in ships and stations and settlements on 1,000 worlds, beings of every species were forming bonds that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Crystalline beings were learning to appreciate the warmth of organic friendship. Reptilian warriors were discovering the strength that came from vulnerability. Gaseous collectives were exploring the strange joy of individual connection. And everywhere there were dogs. Not the original Earth dogs, but their descendants and genetic cousins, bred and adapted for life among the stars. Dogs who wagged their tails at aliens of every shape and size. Dogs who leaned into any hand that reached out to them with kindness. Dogs who taught the galaxy, one tail wag at a time, that love was not a limited resource to be hoarded but an infinite gift to be shared. Ambassador Teatrix looked down at Max, who had fallen asleep at her feet, his old body rising and falling with each peaceful breath. She had lived for over 300 years, and she expected to live for 300 more. But she knew that she would never forget this small, furry creature who had changed everything. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing he could not hear her but needing to say it anyway. "Thank you for showing us the way." Outside the observation window, the stars burned bright and eternal, each one a sun around which worlds orbited, worlds full of beings who were learning, slowly but surely, how to connect with each other. The galaxy was vast and ancient and full of wonders, but the greatest wonder of all was the simple truth that the humans had always known. We are not alone. We were never meant to be alone. And when we reach out to each other with kindness and curiosity and love, we become something greater than ourselves. We become family. The Federation's study of human-pack bonding had begun as a research project and become a revolution. And like all true revolutions, it had changed not just policies and procedures but hearts and minds. The galaxy would face many challenges in the years to come. There would be conflicts and crises, disasters and difficulties. But now, for the first time in its long history, the Galactic Federation was truly united. Not by treaties or trade agreements or carefully balanced power dynamics, but by something much simpler and much more powerful. They were united by love. And that, as any human could have told them, was the only bond that truly mattered. Max's tail gave one final wag in his sleep, and T.H. smiled. The old dog was dreaming, perhaps of all the friends he had made across the stars, all the hands that had reached out to pet him, all the hearts he had helped to open. It was a good dream, and thanks to the humans and their remarkable capacity for connection, it was a dream that the entire galaxy was now sharing. The stars continued to burn, the ships continued to fly, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, beings of every shape and size were learning the simple truth that had taken the galaxy so long to understand. Connection is everything. Love is the way. Human pack bonding was the model. And the future was bright.